I really hope this insanity is over, what we went through for the last 20 years. I mean, I really do. I mean, what we went through on about trillions of dollars years later, and the world really not being more safe because of what we did. I want to talk about. I want to talk about people who were opposed to these wars and were correct when they were laughed at. Whether we're talking about Congressman Dennis Kucinich of Ohio, who was a Democratic congressman, or former Congressman Ron Paul, a Republican from Texas. Both were correct, and both were kind of viewed as a laughing stock in the two-party system. Well, Dwight Eisenhower, you remember President Dwight Eisenhower, that crazy left-wing radical? No, Dwight Eisenhower was very much what a Republican should be, a very staid, middle of the road type person, a natural Republican, not the batshit crazy people that's taking over the party. People like Lauren Bobart and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these crazy. Um, and the Democrats had their garbage too. The Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clinton and people like that, all these corporate Democrats. So both parties have their garbage, set of garbage, and both parties have good people in it. And Dwight Eisenhower was correct when he warned us about the military industrial complex in his farewell address in 1961. Ron Paul, who was a former Libertarian candidate for president. Then he became a Republican member of Congress from Texas. Was right when he said recently, "If we can, if we can march in, we can march out." Um, and he's correct in terms of the 20-year war in Afghanistan. Now, don't get me wrong. Ron Paul, in my view, is wrong on economics. I simply reject libertarian economics. But when it comes to many of the nation's domestic civil liberties issues and on foreign policy, Ron Paul is spot on, and that's why I respect Ron Paul. I'm a socialist that respects Ron Paul, um, and he stated very well in this video just a few days ago. I'm going to play it for you, and I'm going to play this video, and you'll hear a few words from me. So hold tight.
Hello, this is Ron Paul with your weekly update from Monday, August 30th. A tragically stupid war comes to a tragic end. Sunday's news report that the Biden administration mistakenly killed 9 members of one Afghan family, including 6 children, in retaliation for last week's suicide attack, which killed 13 U.S. service members, is a sad and sick epitaph on the 20-year Afghanistan war. Promising to get tough on ISIS, which suddenly reemerged to take responsibility for the suicide attack, the most expensive military and intelligence apparatus on earth appears to have gotten it wrong again. Interventionists love to pretend they care about girls and women in Afghanistan, but it is in reality a desperate attempt to continue the 20-year U.S. occupation. If we leave, they say girls and women will be discriminated against by the Taliban. It's hard to imagine a discrimination worse than being incinerated by a drone strike. But these collateral damage attacks over the past 20 years have killed scores of civilians, just like today. That's the worst part of this whole terrible war. Day after day after day for 20 years, civilians were killed because of the noble effort to remake Afghanistan in the image of the United States. But the media and the warmongers who call the shots in government and the private military industrial sector could not have cared less. Who recalls a single report on how many civilians were just collateral damage in the futile U.S. war? Sadly, these children killed on Sunday, 2 of them reportedly just 2 years old, have been the ones forced to pay the price for a failed and bloody U.S. foreign policy. Yes, the whole exit from Afghanistan has been a debacle. Biden, but especially his military planners and the incompetent advisors, deserves much of what has been piled onto them this past week or so about these incompetence. Maybe if Biden's Secretary of Defense and Joint Chiefs Chairman had spent a bit more time planning the Afghan exit and a lot less time obsessing on how to turn the U.S. military into a laboratory for cultural Marxism, we might have actually had a workable plan. We know that actual experts like Colonel Douglas McGregor did have a plan to get us out of that would have spared innocent lives. But because this decorated U.S. Army veteran was tainted by his service in the previous administration, service that was solely focused on how to get out of Afghanistan safely, he would not be consulted by the Pentagon's woke top military brass. Trump also should share some of the blame currently being showered on Biden. He wanted to get out years ago, but never had the courage to stand up to the also incompetent generals and experts he foolishly hired to advise him. Similarly, many conservatives, especially neoconservatives, are desperate to attack Biden, not for how he got out of Afghanistan, but for the fact that he is getting us out of Afghanistan. That tells you all you need to know about how profitable war is to the warmongers. I've always said, we just marched in, we can just march out, and I stand by that view. Yes, you can just march out of these idiotic interventions, but you do it and use a map. Thanks for listening.
Okay, give me a moment. Well, okay. What do I have to say about that? Well, this is what I have to say. He's correct that both Biden and Trump bear some responsibility for some of the aspects of this withdrawal. Um, and yeah, well, and I'll go into that in a few moments. He lost me on cultural Marxism. I think I know what he means by that. There's really no such a thing as called cultural Marxism, by the way. That's I don't know where people get it. But he's also correct about when other folks on the conservative side of the equation criticizing Biden, not for how he's withdrawing, for the fact that he is withdrawing from Afghanistan. So, um, as I said, I would say that I agree with pretty much 95% of what he just said just there. Um, and anyway, but the USA, I'm going to give you my take on this. USA does not, they do not fuck with Saudi Arabia because of its oil. But Saudi Arabia spreads most of the terrorism against the West. That's stated fact. That same USA bullies Iran, which does next to nothing compared to Saudi Arabia. But because they're an oil-rich country and they've had their butt hurt over the Iran hostage situation in 1980, that there is a frenzy to continue to fuck with Iran, and it's at the U.S. own stupidity that they are doing this, because Iran, if the United States and Iran would actually negotiate, they can come to a mutual understanding on both the United States' terms and on Iran's terms, and Iran could become a Western democracy. But it's all up to the United States to stop fucking with them. You hear you you hear the neocons from the Bush Cheney era spreading the fears about the Taliban. Well, here's a news flash about them. The Taliban are not concerned with global jihad at all. They're not concerned with caliphates and all that. They are mostly nomadic people that wants to basically feed to themselves. But a lot of these people were hurled as like the founding fathers by Ronald Reagan. If you don't believe me, it's true. 1985, A lot of these bastards came over there to hang out with Ronald Reagan, and hey, they became our enemies later on. If the USA wants oil, I mean, it wants the oil and severed ties with Saudi Arabia at the same time, well, there is an effective and common sense way to do this. And I will argue that instead of bullying Venezuela, which in no way pose any threat at all to the United States, the national security of the United States would not be breached because of the current government of Venezuela. Remember that Venezuela is an oil-rich country, and if we must purchase oil from another country, I think it would be far more commonsensical to purchase it from Venezuela than it would be to purchase it from Saudi Arabia. Even if you believe the overly exaggerated myth of authoritarianism that exists in Venezuela, they are a beacon of democracy and liberty compared to Saudi Arabia. That's right. That is absolutely right. I mean, you have a country which is Christian, heavily dominantly Roman Catholic, some Protestants, and various other religious groupings. They have religious freedom in Venezuela to this day, even now. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, which is an Islamic state governed by Sharia law, if you're Muslim and you leave the Muslim faith in Saudi Arabia, whether you become a Christian or you become atheist or some other religious uh, viewpoint or theology that you embrace, it'll get you executed. Yes, that is correct. Now, I'm not going to say that Venezuela is the country with the most progressive views on LGBTQ equality. I am not sure what their status is currently, but rest assured that they are very progressive next to Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, you're a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer person in any capacity in Saudi Arabia, you get the death penalty. Uh, you get the death penalty. That's absolutely the truth. Venezuela, speaking of the death penalty, does not have the death penalty. I repeat, Venezuela does not have capital punishment. In fact, it was one of the first countries in the world that got on board with this whole idea of not having a death penalty. And when I hear I hear people in the United States want to sit there and lecture all of us lefties for saying, "Hey, stop fucking with Venezuela." As soon as any of y'all say, "Let's end the death penalty," I'll give y'all a listen. But if you're going to be for the death penalty, I have no interest in what you have to say. And that's the truth. Now, Venezuela, um, it has an elected government. Now, people want to argue that Venezuela is this communist state. Well, it's not Cuba. It is not Cuba. I mean, you want to talk about what exists as communist states in the United States right now? China is officially a communist state. North Korea is officially a communist state. Vietnam is officially a communist state. Cuba is officially a communist state. Laos is officially a communist state. All of those nations are governed by, Marxist, Leninist parties. Now, the thing about it is, China's not even all that communist anymore. They've actually have a semblance of a free enterprise system that exists in there. Um, I'm not sure about Laos. I know that Vietnam is a little more on a democratizing direction than it used to be. Um, as far as I said, I'm not sure about Laos. North Korea is weird because, in one sense, it's a dinosaur Stalinist style state, but it operates more like a dynasty than it does a typical communist state. Now, Cuba would be considered a traditional communist state. And I would argue of all the countries there are communists, Cuba is probably the most democratic of them all. Um, they are, and the United States basically having these embargoes and sanctions imposed against the people of Cuba is a crime against humanity. Do I have problems with certain aspects of Cuba's government? Sure. But the fault is the United States. The way the United States bullies Cuba, just like they bullies Venezuela, is what's causing what's negative about each of those societies going on within. But with Venezuela, the United Socialist Party of Nicolas Maduro is the governing party. It is, for all intents and purposes, it is officially a communist party. There's a multi-party system in Venezuela. They still have an opposition in Venezuela, and with regard to the economy itself, it is still a capitalist economy. In fact, the Venezuelan economy, the government sector of Venezuela, the government sector of Denmark and France are both larger than the government sector of Venezuela. So, well, all these people here in the United States who thinks that Venezuela is this Maoist, Stalinist state in our Western Hemisphere, just like the alarmism of Chile under Salvador Allende, um, there is not really anything to be alarmist about with regard to Venezuela. Venezuela is, they even have a free press, probably one of the most free press around, second to the United States. So, yeah, so much for that theory about Venezuela. Yeah, I would probably vote for some of the more social democratic forces in the country, but there's too much lies and propaganda made against Venezuela. But the United States fucks with Venezuela, and they go and in the words of Tulsi Gabbard last year, when Donald Trump was president, Donald Trump is Saudi Arabia's bitch, and she was correct when she said that. And it's still going on with Biden. Biden is the bitch of Saudi Arabia too. Every president seems to be the bitch of Saudi Arabia lately. But I digress. That that when it comes to leaving Afghanistan, which is what I originally wanted to talk about, um, this is what this was the correct thing to do. It should have been done a hell of a lot sooner. Shame on Biden for not doing it sooner. Shame on Trump for not doing it sooner. Shame on Obama for not doing it sooner. And fuck George W. Bush for really getting us mired into this shit to begin with. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you disagree, well, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. As a Feel free to share the content on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it because we're all the muckrakers of our time. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and until next time, I am American Social Democracy. Peace, class struggle, absolutely now, and no more neocon wars. Let that be a thing of the past.